Greetings from socialist New York City, coming to you from the ascendant, victorious left. I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I am editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right. So, and if you notice the flag, you know what? I mean, people laugh, but that's the flag I put up. And when we get invaded, I am not going to be the first one against the wall. So I have 350 flags. So, you know, I have the flag of Djibouti. If Djibouti attacks us, I'm ready.
So obviously the big news. Yes, I for one welcome our new Djiboutian rulers. So we put this together. This is kind of like a quick response to the news here. We weren't expecting to have any election results whatsoever in the New York City mayor's race, which completed yesterday after a week of early voting here in New York, until July 1st. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, because we have ranked choice voting here. And the tabulation system is complicated. So let's say, the way it works for people who are unaware, and I'll just be very quick about it, is you vote for up to 5 candidates. So there were more than 5 candidates in the race, but basically, let's say there are 10 candidates in a race. So first, all the votes are tabulated for whoever for all the top ranked votes are counted first. Okay. Then whoever gets the fewest number of those number 1 ranking votes is eliminated. And then all of their votes are redistributed to whoever those people voted for number 2. So that's done at the Board of Elections and so on. So then there's another round at the Board of Elections where they have another elimination. Whoever comes in 7th is eliminated. And we go look at their number 2s and so on until you abolish all of them. Now, the practical effect of this is that it's possible to win the mayoralty in a ranked choice, or any office in a ranked choice voting scheme, even if you don't get the most number 1s. If you get a bunch of number 2s and number 3s, more than everybody else, those could add up to more than the number 1s in the end, and you could prevail. In this case, that didn't come into play at all. Governor Cuomo, this was a two-man race effectively between former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and Democratic Socialist upstart 33-year-old Zohran Mamdani, who was endorsed by Bernie Sanders and AOC. In this situation, Mamdani came in so far ahead that even if Cuomo had managed to put together a lot of number 2s, he wouldn't have been able to overcome the lead no matter what. This was a landslide victory by Mamdani. Bear in mind, this is a state assemblyman that no one had heard of a year ago.
Yeah.
And he was a complete nobody. And we should talk about why this has happened, who he is, and what it means, because I think this is going to be looked at as a bellwether race for not necessarily the nation, but certainly for the future of the Democratic Party, because they're really trying to figure out what to do after last year's November defeat.
Oh, and they are freaking out this morning. But here's, I think, let me start to dissect the results here. And real quick, let's look at Cuomo real quick, Ted, and say that Cuomo came into this race so entitled. You know, it's just like, oh, I'm going to march in and save New York City. Well, that almost never works in practical politics. The fact is that Cuomo came in with this sense of entitlement. Do you remember Jeb?
Jeb,
like Liza, but
it was J-E-B with an exclamation point. By the way, it's also weird that's not actually his real name, right?
Well, there's a lot of weird things about that family.
That's an acronym.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like something like John Edward Bush or something.
Oh, well, anyway, so Jeb was going to skate or do extremely well in the primaries in 2016. Wah, wah. When you run for office, especially high public office, like mayor of New York, like president of the United States, you have to want it. You have to live, drink, and eat it. This is something, and Ted, you mentioned something in our podcast just a few days ago that Cuomo actually hates New York City. At least that was your impression.
Yes, he's often talked about how he doesn't like New York.
Well,
And Mamdani is he's a New Yorker through and through, lives in Queens, was among his campaign events. He did the polar bear swim at Coney Island in Brooklyn this past January. Brisk. Although with climate change, no big deal.
Not like it used to be. The Chicago polar bear plunge is still pretty brutal.
That's hardcore. And nothing really beats the Russian polar bear swims in Lake St. Petersburg. But I digress. So, so he didn't like, look, it's interesting. Yeah, we should talk a little bit about what happened with Cuomo. I mean, Cuomo, obviously his name was raked through the mud due to the sex charges against him that I think were pretty credible. He had over a dozen accusers. One or two could be lying bitches, but once you hit 12, looking at you, Bill Cosby, I'm kind of believing the women, right? So that didn't help him. He didn't seem to have any humility. He didn't even manage to thread that needle of, hey, if I offended you, if I didn't know, if I'd known you didn't want my hand up your skirt, I wish I'd read you. I'd read you better. None of that, right? Like, I'm sorry if you feel bad. But I don't think that's what did him in. I think when you and I talked about the upcoming mayoral race like over a year ago, I think you were a little surprised when I said, "Oh, it's Cuomo is the odds-on favorite," and it kind of looked like Cuomo was trying to replicate the Jerry Brown model when he decided after the governor, his period in the California governor's mansion, to go and become mayor of Oakland, California. That was different because there's nothing sexy about being the mayor of Oakland. That's a city with a lot of big problems.
Yeah.
And that felt like I'm an experienced man. I'm going to give back to the community with my experience and fight hard for people who are beleaguered and need help. That felt like a good guy. Andrew Cuomo felt like entitled. And it was kind of like a year and a half ago, we're still reeling from COVID. And I think the sense was with, Asian ladies being pushed in front of subways, teams of looters going through Soho and, emptying out the pharmacies. There was a sense that the city was out of control. It still is, but there was a sense that like we need a big, mean Italian guy to come in and knock some heads. And that guy was Andrew Cuomo. And I said, I really see how this could work. But then he failed to recognize just how pissed off people are here. I mean, if you're going to have old ladies being pushed in front of the subway, your rents shouldn't be going up. You live in a shithole. Your rent should be going down. But your rents are going up, even though, half the buildings are empty in the city. The fix is in. It feels corrupt. The sitting mayor is corrupt. He was basically pardoned by Trump and everything got dropped. But New Yorkers haven't forgotten. They have long memories. And they're really pissed off about prices. Mamdani made his entire race about high rents and high prices. And also, but I don't think that put him over the end. I think in the end, what put him over the finish line was the fact that the establishment lined up behind Cuomo. I swear to God, if Cuomo could go back in time, he probably would give up those endorsements by establishment people like the Clintons, and he would just in the New York Times and just go it alone. He might have won. The New York Times thing was absolutely brutal. The New York Times stopped making local endorsements in 2021. Yet, as a workaround, they couldn't resist, and they wrote an anti-endorsement. They literally said, vote for anyone you want. Even Paperboy Love Bandit, or whatever the fuck his name is, vote for anyone you want, not Mamdani, because he's so scary. I wasn't going to vote for Mamdani necessarily. I thought he's 33 years old. He's very inexperienced. He's only served in the state legislature for 4 years. He's wet behind the ears. But when I read that editorial, I was like, holy shit. The powers that be, the elites, the corporatists in the Democratic Party and in this city, the business interests, are terrified of Mamdani. He's got my vote, and I've talked to lots of other New Yorkers who agree with me.
Well, clearly, and the Republican nominee is head of the founder of the Guardian Angels talk show host,
Curtis Sliwa.
And does he have a chance this time? I mean, he
Um,
really got his ass kicked last time he ran.
First of all, I want to be clear. I really like Curtis Sliwa.
So do I.
And I think he loves New York City. And he's a massive cat aficionado, which means, Curtis, we love you. And, there would be far worse things than a Mayor Sliwa, for sure. He's a true patriot for New York City, even though he's more conservative than I would like. That said, I think what's going to happen here is, we're going into the general election. Normally, it would be a coronation for the Democratic nominee. But the DNC, the Democratic establishment that runs this city, Mike Bloomberg, they all spent big money to keep Mamdani out. They're terrified of a so-called democratic socialist in the Bernie AOC mold of being mayor. So they're going to try to kneecap him. The question is, can they unify around an opponent? There's not enough Republican voters for a straight D versus R, for an R to prevail under any terms. So I don't see Sliwa winning. The real question is, can Cuomo win if he runs as independent in the general election? He's making that determination now. He has the signatures. He can do it if he chooses to. If he chooses to do that, then there's the question of, will the anti-Mamdani coalition opposition be able to coalesce behind one candidate? The smart move for them would probably be to all endorse, all go behind one, kind of like the way that Biden, got Klobuchar and Buttigieg and those other guys to all drop out at the same time, Beto O'Rourke, and support him in the right before Super Tuesday. I don't know if they can get their shit together. I don't see Curtis Sliwa working with Cuomo. That's to Curtis Sliwa's credit. But anything's possible. These are very different times, and the Democratic Party nationally is going to have to decide just how much they want. Right now, they're about to get MAGA'd, but from the left.
Oh yeah.
This is a hostile takeover of the New York City Democratic Party.
They're going to get MAGA'd from the right as well, because Fox this morning is saying, see, this is the Democratic Party. Zohran Mamdani is the face of the Democratic Party. They're a socialist party now. They are AOC. They are Bernie Sanders. And the corporatists are going to be marginalized. But the right wing is going to use this to bludgeon the Democratic Party and say, look, they keep nominating these people, they keep electing these people. In Chicago, where I work for the Chicago Tribune, we've had Mayor Brandon Johnson, who was kind of a same story. Nobody had ever heard of him. He was an organizer for the teachers union there in Chicago, this CTU, and won shockingly. I mean, again, that was just a jaw dropper of a victory for the de facto democratic socialist faction of the Democratic Party in Chicago. And he has been a train wreck. I don't know what kind of competence Mamdani brings to New York City, and you got to know what you're doing. You at least have to have some goals, and some substantial goals. Not, I'm going to fix rents, but rather, here's the legislation I'm going to propose, and here's why I think it will stand up in the courts. I know it sounds like drivel, and it sounds like, oh, great, another white paper from a candidate. But you do have to have some semblance, some idea of how you're going to govern. Chicago currently has a social democratic mayor. And as I said, he's been a train wreck. He's already driven the budget deficit is now approaching $1 billion. He still doesn't know how he's going to pay for it. He's talking about grocery taxes now and upping the grocery tax. Ted, I mean, what could you be more regressive than a grocery tax? Could you be less socialist than a grocery tax? I mean, seriously. Maybe a tax on caviar and high-end items would make more sense, but he didn't do that. He's scrambling to try to find money. They're talking about taking out a loan, which means his grandkids are going to be paying off what effectively is a handout to the teachers union contract, which is $1 billion increase in salaries. New York, if they elect this guy, stand by. It's going to get, you think things are bad now? It's going to be considerably worse. They're going to tax you even more. I suspect has he mentioned his support for police officers or for law enforcement, which is really necessary there. I mean, you and I took the subway. My God, it's like the old West down there.
It's true.
I have expected to hear wah wah wah. Ted, what is that? Oh, you get used to it. Wah wah wah.
Well, anyway. I mean, so that, look, believe it or not, I don't have such look. Mamdani's, whether he can govern or not, is going to have a lot to do with who he chooses to appoint to help him. I'm going to say that there's aspects to this that a lot of outsiders, non-New Yorkers, don't understand, which is that this is a strong city council system. Okay. The mayor is not as strong as he is in a number of other American cities. However, he's a lot stronger than he used to be, thanks to old Mayor Bloomberg, who brought the city schools under his jurisdiction. It's the second largest school system in the nation with over 1 million students. And LA is the biggest. And it is it's a big locus of power. He has, to answer your question about the cops, said that he does not believe in defunding the police, although in 2020, at the height of the BLM movement, he did say that he wanted to defund the police, but I think he meant that in the context at the time of moving resources from the police to more social work and so on. But be that as it may, the city council is left-wing here. It always has been. It's been to the left of the mayor for decades, and it should be pointed out that the city council was swept yesterday by Democratic socialists aligned with Mamdani. So no Democratic socialist lost any race that they were in for city council yesterday. The only Democratic socialist who lost was for the comptroller's office. So that's going to be, so I think what's going to happen is, for the first time, the council is going to have a mayor that's ideologically aligned with them and on a number of manners. Now, I agree that the right, Fox News and everything, they're going to be beating up the Democratic Party this way, and it will work everywhere except in New York City. New Yorkers are very happy about this. It should, if you look at the results, most New Yorkers, I mean, if you look at the sum total of the people who voted against Cuomo and for progressives who are not Mamdani, it's like 50-60% of the vote in like a 9-10 way race. I mean, that's an overwhelming rejection of Cuomo. Now, I want to sort of get into why Cuomo lost. So Cuomo was 67 years old and obviously didn't have the energy to go pounding on as many doors as a guy who's half his age. But also, he really wrapped himself in the mantle of the establishment at a time when New Yorkers are surly as shit. The Rent Control Board just approved a massive rent increase for rent-stabilized apartments throughout the city at a time when it couldn't possibly have been worse. I just think it was a huge mistake. He got all this institutional support from institutions that are despised, like the New York Times and Bill Clinton. It's like and he didn't seem to want to work for it. All he needed to do to win was say one of two things. It might be nice if Israel stopped killing so many Palestinians, or he could have said, what
does that have to do with New York?
Rents are pretty rough. Rents are pretty rough. What it has to do with New York? Are you kidding? I mean, winning the vote in New York is why Harry Truman supported the creation of the state of Israel, right, in 1948. So, I mean, Israeli politics are stupidly, but factually intertwined.
I think your second point is better taken than your first. The rents in crime.
I am currently paying $4,900 a month for my 2-bedroom apartment, which you've been to. And It's a lovely apartment, but it's not $4,900 a month apartment. And in fact, it won't be for long because it'll be a $5,100 a month apartment soon. And the thing is, And meanwhile, the unit right next door, identical to mine, has been vacant for at least 3 years. The whole building is half empty. That the whole neighborhood, the whole thing is like that, right? When a city's falling apart, things should get cheaper. It just keeps getting more expensive. When Mamdani's called for a rent freeze, not even a reduction. Okay, listen to me, Zohran. It's like, a rent freeze is not radical. You could cut my rent in half; it would still be too fucking high. And so he's also called for free buses. That sounds crazy, but when you know how the New York City transit system works,
I was going to say it's heavily subsidized.
Well, that's true. 60% of the people who ride the buses didn't pay their fares; they snuck on, so they're not getting that money anyway. And we have free transfers between buses and subways. Most people who board a bus started their trip on the train and then transferred to the bus and for free. So really, it's probably not going to make that much difference. It's probably going to be a wash when you consider the cost of collecting the fares, and keep guarding the fares, keeping the drivers safe from robbery and all that. It's probably the MTA might come out ahead by doing this. So it's, sometimes collecting a wee bit of money, and Scott, you're right, it's 90% subsidized by the US DOT. So it's kind of like, you could do this. Now, Mamdani doesn't have the authority. He doesn't control the MTA. So the big question here is whether he would be able to work out a good enough relationship with the governor who holds all the purse strings for New York City, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Right.
She's a right-wing Democrat. So that would be a challenge. But if he can work out an amicable relationship with her, a personal relationship, they might be able to get things done.
And going forward, first of all, I want to say that a Republican can win in New York City. Giuliani and Bloomberg both ran as Republicans and won.
Fake Republicans.
Regardless, a Republican can win. But you're right. Curtis Sliwell is not a fake Republican. He's generally conservative. And I'm not sure if he's MAGA, is he? I hope not. That would make me sad.
No, I don't think so. A man who's that into cats cannot possibly be MAGA.
God. And also, you forget that Adams, current incumbent Mayor Adams, is running as an independent. So
True.
So the corrupt faction of the city has someone to vote for. Thank God, because those people don't get heard nearly enough in City Hall. The moneyed corrupt interests there. So yeah, I think your analysis of Cuomo is dead on. He thought that because the New York Times loves me and the Clintons love me, I love me. Who doesn't love me? Mm-hmm. I was just watching that campaign, and I've seen it so many times before, Ted, the sense of entitlement by a candidate, and it's suicide. It never works. It rarely works. It can, especially if it's some kind of like ensconced city councilman or a state senator who's been in office for 3,000 years. They just kind of, run through the motions and they get reelected. When you run for office the first time, like I said, a major office, governor, mayor, president, you better friggin' want it. And you have to want it bad. Cuomo thought he could just skate to it. He's going to be the savior of New York and they will love me. Well, wrong answer. The New Yorkers saw this over and over and over again with him, and saw his worthless family. His brother, and this guy's a sex offender. Couple that with the fact that he felt entitled to the position. Again, he could run for state senate, right? He could have run, or let's be fair, mayor of Albany, which probably would have made more sense.
Cuomo?
Yeah. And it wouldn't have gotten, but mayor of New York City gets a hell of a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. So you'd better, it's the same thing for mayor of Los Angeles, mayor of.
And we're a hardworking city. Not to say that people in other cities are lazy, but we're a city of hardworking people because we have high rents to pay, and we want our politicians to work hard for it. A classic example of this was Ed Koch, who was routinely in the 1980s out on the streets at subway entrances during the morning and afternoon rush hours asking, how am I doing? How am I doing? And I remember I saw him one time doing that. And several people said, "You suck." And I was just like, yeah, I agreed that he sucked, but I liked that he was there. And I think that's we like to see someone work for it. I think, I mean, it's interesting to me that he didn't seem to connect with the city and its current state. The zeitgeist counts for a lot. You mentioned Eric Adams. Let's not gloss over the incumbent mayor. I mean, he is the mayor, even though he was indicted on federal corruption charges that he then got rid of by betraying the immigrant community, right? People who forgot what happened, he basically was being bribed by the Turkish government to overlook fire codes. Charming. And then was indicted by the DOJ. Adams went to Washington and sucked Trump's dick. And in exchange, Trump said, okay, thanks for sucking my dick. I'll drop the charges, but you've got to agree to cooperate with ICE, no longer be a sanctuary city, and let me deport New Yorkers. New York has always been an enthusiastic sanctuary city. Rudy Giuliani, as governor of mayor from 1993 to 2001, was very pro-sanctuary city and refused to cooperate with the predecessor agency to ICE, INS. So both parties have always been very anti-deportations. Adams was like, well, I care more about my own black ass than I care about their brown asses, so they can just go. And Adams is but Adams is going to be on the ballot. Probably, if you're the DNC. Is he a factor? I think so. I mean, he's very unpopular, but look at it this way. I mean, if you're the DNC, you're like, all right, so Mamdani won with 43% of the vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means 57% of the vote or 56% of the vote is unaccounted for. What if we can get everyone to unite? What if we could get Sliwa to drop out and get Cuomo not to run and endorse Adams and get both sides to campaign for Adams? Maybe bribe Sliwa with he can become police chief or something. Give it to, can we get enough Islamophobic shithead New Yorkers to vote against Mamdani and smear him as a child of privilege, which has already started, and we can get into his personal background and all that. Can we get to 50.1%? That's what they're thinking right now, and Adams would be the person to coalesce around more so than Cuomo.
Wow. I mean, that's so funny to think that Eric Adams has a lane to get reelected, given his catastrophic.
Because corruption's been working for him from day one, and nothing says corruption like Democratic National Committee.
Well, so like I said, New York. I mean, the crime. You feel that has not gotten better, or has it?
It has. The violent crime is definitely down, but there's a lot of property crime and a lot of young kids going in like locusts and cleaning out the shelves of stores with gangs of people with giant trash bags and stuff. That's happening a lot. The subways definitely feel menacing. There's insane people screaming and shadow boxing. And there's no sense of authority. What passes for authority is the subway rolls into a station and an announcement comes over the speaker system. NYPD is at this station. Please feel free to reach out to them if you have any concerns or questions. That's not helping me if a lunatic is on my subway car right now that up the stairs and on top of a mezzanine by the turnstiles are a couple of cops on their iPhones. That's not helping me. And I think we need the cops on the platforms and in the trains the way they used to be in the 1980s.
Wasn't there a Metro police force? There was a transit. They were a transit police. They were folded in, I believe, under Giuliani foolishly when the city felt safer. They created something called the Transit Bureau that was supposed to replace them. But the practical effect is we've gone from seeing cops
who knew the subway system in and out, who knew how to turn off the power and chase suspects into the tunnels and knew where the tunnels led and all that, to no police presence whatsoever. As you see, you just don't see cops. A couple of months ago, I saw 2 cops in my subway station. It was as if the Beatles had reunited. There were so many people gathered around them, thanking them to be there, me included, because we just never see them. So
the same thing's happening in Chicago. I keep harkening back to it, obviously, because I'm cartoonist for Chicago Tribune. But last couple of times, my wife and I have been in Chicago. We took the L, and it's a great system. It's a great subway system, but no cops on it. And there's a homeless guy asleep on every single car.
Mm-hmm.
So, taking up 3, 4, 5, 6 seats.
Smelly.
Gross. Yeah, his own urine seeping, sloshing back and forth. And it's gross. And it makes it a very unlivable and unlikable city. So going forward, Ted, can we see, let me ask you, you are in New York, you're boots on the ground, you live in New York City. Anything's possible, but is it possible that we will see a Mayor Mamdani? Well, is that a thing that could happen?
It's very possible. At this point, look, despite everything that I said and the machinations of the DNC,
forget everything he said.
Well, we're trying to handicap all the possibilities, Scott, right? As always. I think if I had to put money on it, I'd say he's going to be the mayor of New York City. He wouldn't be the oldest, by the way. Back in the 1880s, there was a 30-year-old guy that Tammany Hall decided to, basically kneecap. He lasted 2 years. But basically, I think he'll be the mayor. I think what we're seeing is a dramatic political realignment where the old ways of like liberal Democrat versus conservative Republican, I don't think that's a thing much anymore, either in New York or in this country. I think what we're looking at now is populism versus establishmentarianism. There's more in common between the populist left and the populist right, and more in common between the establishment left and establishment right. The populists are more local focused. Let's help our own first before we think about outsiders. The establishment people are thinking about, we want the money to keep flowing to us, and we want to, focus on internationalism and wars overseas and so on. And this is a big, most New Yorkers who voted for Mamdani, they didn't vote for Mamdani. They voted against the DNC. They voted against the Democratic establishment. They voted against high rents. They voted against high prices. They voted against being ignored. They voted to make the establishment scared and angry. If the vote had not had people on it, if its vote was like in the Stanford prison experiment, if you could push a button in the voting booth that sent an electrical shock through the asses of the rich and powerful, that's what that vote was. That's what people wanted to do.
Okay, and before we wrap things up here, what's the mood of the city this morning? Is it, obviously you can't speak because you haven't been to all 5 boroughs and all that. But,
no.
But what's your sense? Like I said, you walk the streets, you go get a bagel, you go get a nosh, you go get a bagel with a schmear. You're a New Yorker, and
I think it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
There's a lot of young. Before I should say about the demographics of the vote that really are important. So 25%, which is huge, of these voters for Mamdani never voted in an election before.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's huge. That's huge.
Scott, check this out. This broke my brain. So the first half of those 25% are under 30. All right. Guess how old? The other half is over age 55, have never voted before. The very old and the very young voted for Mamdani.
How do you never vote?
I have been saying for years that there are tons of people on the left and on the right, to the right of the Republican Party and to the left of the Democratic Party, that just the reason that we have such a low voter turnout in the United States, it's from these people who don't identify with either party. They would vote if they liked what they saw or they felt there was an opportunity to send a message, and they did vote yesterday. But I'm sorry, I lost track of what was your question?
Well, I was actually going to piggyback on what you just said. I'm hearing more and more lefties, righties, friends of mine, over and over. Ted, I know you're hearing the same damn thing. God, I wish we had a third or fourth option.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And I come back and say, well, you do.
You do.
If you'd stop voting people in who are, have their own vested interests and make it very difficult, but we have libertarian candidates, we have Green Party candidates,
Mm-hmm.
we obviously in New York you have Social Democratic Party candidates. So, I mean, from what we're saying here, this becomes a toss-up. I mean, obviously a lot of moving pieces this morning. And
the mood is a toss-up too, right? To your point. So the mood is split. Like people, there's some big smiles on people's faces this morning, and at the same time, there's some worried looks. Like there's a big Jewish vote in this city. 20% of New York's Jewish vote went to Mamdani, but that means 80% did not. Yeah. A lot of them voted for Lander, who cross endorsed Mamdani, but a lot of them didn't. And they're nervous. They're like, wait, this guy's born in Uganda. He's Muslim. He said when he was asked, will you go during the mayoral debate, will you go to Israel? He said, no, I'm focusing on New York. That makes some New York Jewish people nervous. I think they don't have anything to be scared of, but I can tell them that, but who's going to listen? Yeah. If you're scared, you're scared. It's not like, I don't think Mamdani is even like a religious dude. I think he's just culturally grew up that way. His ethnicity is Indian. He's actually, I really recognize a lot in his story. He went, like me, to Columbia University, now a non-accredited educational institution. He was a scholarship kid, like I was. He studied hard in school and got into a really great elite public high school called Bronx Science, which is a top STEM high school in the United States, public school. His mother is obviously she's an accomplished film director, but she's not Spielberg. She's not rich. His net worth is $200,000. He has a little bit of land on the lake, on the side of on the banks of Lake Victoria, in Uganda. So that's esoteric. And
hold on to that.
That's very strange.
That can only go up.
As they say, as Ugandan real estate goes, so goes Ugandan
Congo.
Real estate. Yes, indeed. I don't know. Maybe it could be great. I don't know. I've never been.
It sounds like it might be pretty. So
yeah, it might be.
Going for now, the DNC, and by extension, the Clintons and that crew.
I'm glad you brought this up.
It's going to be interesting to see where they stand on this election, what they plan to do. They've got to be shitting their pants this morning, Ted. They've got to be going, if those numbers are accurate, and I have no reason to doubt your numbers, 25% new voters, half of those were under 30, half of those were above 55. That sends a shot. Those are the people who didn't vote for Biden in 2024.
That's right.
Or Kamala, sorry, whatever, whoever
Same
the fuck
difference.
it was. Yeah, really, tomato. That, to my mind, if I was a Democrat and I was a Democrat, an active Democrat, I'd look at those numbers and go, holy fuck. They are looking for something. Now, there's an opportunity, I think, for the Democratic Party to retool itself. You can be a social democrat and still be for commerce, for bringing jobs, for jobs. You can be a social democrat and be for safe streets. You can be a social democrat and not be a total toady for the teachers union and actually want good public schools. I'd like to see the party retool itself in that way. That would make it much more saleable. You and I both know we're not talking about smart/savvy people. You're going to see the moneyed interests try to fuck over that 25%, disenfranchise them again, and make them shut up, go away. That was their whole. That was the campaign.
That's what they do all the time.
That was the slogan in 24, Ted, for Kamala was, hey, moderate white people, fuck you, shut up and vote for us.
That's right.
Not a winning slogan.
Clearly not. and so the thing is, so yeah, no, that's the question, right? There, I totally agree, Scott. What you're saying is spot on. So now that, again, the Democratic Party is faced with a choice. The DNC, the party bosses, what are we going to do? Are we going to do nothing, which would be the smart move, and just allow the party to go in the direction it's going to go? Let the party pick winners, and those are going to be the people who have the best shot at beating the Republicans. Or are we going to put our fat, gross, greasy thumbs on the scale again, the way we always do, like we did against Bernie and so on, and against John Edwards and against Howard Dean and against Jesse Jackson and on and on and on. And I think, they're going to have to decide, or, do we want to coalesce behind some corporatist and, like you said, Scott, push them, shove them down the throats of voters who do not want them, and make them not want to vote Democratic or just vote at all, and so that we can maintain ideological control. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, the ad always says past performance is no guarantee of future returns. But I used to work on Wall Street, and we used to make fun of that saying. We say, yeah, but usually it is. And so, usually it is. They've always done the same thing. So it stands to reason they'll probably keep doing the same thing that they always do. But they do have an opportunity every time they face this decision to change their consistently losing course of action. Unless they'd rather just lose to the Republicans, but keep control of the party and just keep collecting the money and keep the grift going. And they don't give a shit about them, the people or the country or the city or whatever. I think you and I both know the answer to that.
Yeah, we do. And so do our listeners. If you've been paying attention at all. All righty. Well, we said this would be a short one. I told my wife we'd be 15 minutes. She said you'll be 40, and she's right.
Never argue with her. Never. I wouldn't.
I have to have my grandson on here because now he has gotten to the point where they ask, what is Poppy? They call me Poppy. What does Poppy do for a living? Whenever I go to, he goes, blah, 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 blah. And he's not
so
wrong.
True. So true. So true. All right, Scott, it's singing time, and I'll let you.
Oh, you know what I'm going to do.
I know what you're going to do. All right, 3, 2, 1, boom.
Arise, ye children of starvation. Arise, ye wretched of the earth. For the International shall free the human race. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum bum ba bum 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 bum. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting real enthusiastic about that. Wow.